basically on treasury bills, treasury bonds, government securities, trading, and back office functions, communications, and etc. I will also be side by side with him. And then he will continue for 3 weeks until 20th of May. Until 20th of May, he'll continue. Hopefully, he can finish the syllabus by that day. Then on the 25th, there'll be a representative from Money Brokers Association, hopefully your president, talking to you on money market ethics, money broking ethics, terminology used, and all that. I will also supporting him. Then 26th, 27th are Poya holidays, Vesak Poya. Then on the 1st of June will be Mr. Jailath from the Central Bank, the Assistant Governor. He might appear for 2 days, 1 or 2 days, hopefully. So that is for the second semester. And the second semester examination, we will discuss a date closer to that. So with this logistics, I don't think anyone has any difficulty, right? Especially with the 2nd May examination, traveling to Institute of Bankers, wearing your mask, taking your sanitizer with you, right? You will not have any problems, right?
Unless otherwise there will be no lockdown.
Yes, hopefully there is not going to be lockdown. Because now Institute Bank got the permission from the health authorities to conduct physical classes. They have got authority, and in fact they are doing a few classes, gathering the students. They have got the permission because the health conditions at the Institute of Bankers have been approved by the health authorities. So as you say, if the general environment in the society declines, that we may have to review the situation. So in preparation for the examination, what I would suggest is that go through the tutorials and the material that we uploaded to the classroom very well, and then also your general knowledge about the money broking and the connected subjects will be very, very important. And to some extent, general knowledge also will be important. And especially the knowledge gathered by you, while doing the assignment will be materially important. So these are the logistical information for the moment. All right. This is the tutorial 4. Did you find this on the classroom uploaded? Yes, did you find it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. How do you all do you all save it on your computers, or do you all take printouts and make a physical file? Most of you save it on the computer itself, right? Either way, it's okay, because the purpose is that for you to be able to use this material for the exam and beyond the exam in your day-to-day working life, as well as if you wish to take on your further studies and further examinations at the Institute of Bankers or elsewhere at the universities. They'll be important. You can use them in a useful manner. Right. Today we'll be talking on money broking from the banker's point of view. What do you think the bankers expect from the money broking fraternity? Efficiency in finding good bids and more business. Anything else that you think that the bankers expect from the money brokers?
Confidentiality.
Confidentiality, that's very good. Confidentiality, yes. But to conclude, more businesses, more business activities, they would also love to see business opportunities, isn't it? Business opportunities brought in by the money brokers. Have you tried that? Now, this slide indicates the financial intermediaries. I think at the first session that we met, I disclosed the meaning of intermediary. Meaning of intermediary is in between some entities, right? Intermediaries in between. Now, in between the central bank and the general consumer or general citizens of this country, central bank does not deal with the normal citizen. Central bank deals with the intermediaries, and the intermediaries deal with the normal citizens. And on the other hand, another dimension is that the savers or excess units, or say people who have excess savings, and the other set of people who would need saved money, called deficit units, to as loans and overdrafts, loans and financial facilities to produce goods and services. So in between are the intermediaries. So what are these intermediaries? In Sri Lankan terms, you have licensed commercial banks. How many of them in Sri Lanka at the moment? Licensed commercial banks, licensed by the Monetary Board of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. They are numbering roughly about 23. Then licensed specialized banks, again authorized by the Monetary Board of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Only difference between the LCBs and LSBs is that LSBs do not issue checkbooks. They don't maintain so-called current accounts. Basically, for the layman, or for the main feature is that they don't issue current accounts or checkbooks. In other words, they don't have to participate in the clearing function of checks. Lanka Clear. However, can you give me an example of a licensed savings bank?
NSB?
National Savings Bank, that's right. Another one? State Mortgage and Investment Bank, SMIB, right? So I think there were about 15 or 16 with the merger of regional development banks to one in the name of RDB, the Southern Development Bank, Uwa Development Bank, Sabaragamu Development Bank. They were all merged together and formed Regional Development Bank. And then the number reduced to about 10 or 11 licensed savings banks. But they do carry substantial funds, deposits from the general public. So they are also sizable entities in the name of licensed savings banks. They are basically doing business type of development banking business, but there is a long way for them to develop. However, they are a category of intermediaries prevalent in Sri Lanka. Then another important category is registered finance companies, or RFCs. What is the number of RFCs you think in Sri Lanka? Registered finance companies? Registered finance companies numbering about 48. Other than the leasing, especially leasing companies, the registered finance companies, there are about 48. And do you remember that the government headed by President Mahinda Rajapaksa, there was some endeavor to categorize the finance companies into 3 categories. Those who carry assets worth more than 8 billion, and those who carry assets less than 8 billion. And another category they chose, another category which needed more support or assistance from the central bank, about 4 or 5. And many of them have been closed down at the moment. But the idea was that, idea of the central bank or Ministry of Finance was at that time was to reduce the number of RFCs and then make them stronger to do more business, and then to ease the central bank non-banking supervision division to have more control, more clout over the RFCs. And in my opinion, what I heard, what I gathered is that the present government also follows the same path. They need more mergers, acquisitions happening. They have asked the licensed commercial banks, licensed savings banks, and larger finance companies to merge or acquire the others on mutual terms. I guess recently one merger happened, right? Involving Richard Peary's finance company. Just a few months back, one merger happened. So, ironically, registered finance companies were paying for the depositors a higher rate of interest. And the main difference between the categories of banking, as LSBs and LCBs, and RFC was that RFC's level of compliance to the rules and regulations were a little poor. Therefore, the categorization by the multinational agencies like FATF, Financial Action Task Force, who are in charge of compliance around the world, and IMF and World Bank were little, Sri Lankan standard were a little poor by way of compliance because of mainly the finance companies' level of compliance was very weak compared to the banking institutions. Naturally, among the general public as well, the banking institutions commanded more respect, and the safety of the funds of the depositors is so far considered to be secure with the hands of the banks than with the finance companies. But when it comes to the transactions, deposit taking, then loan granting, finance companies adopted a more linear method or more easy methods of transacting. However, that also as a result of their lower level of compliance to the rules and regulations. Because the rules and regulations applicable to all three categories are not much of a change, more or less equal. However, the level of respect or reputation enjoyed by the finance companies were a little lower because of their lower level of compliance. So these are called deposit-taking institutions. Deposit-taking institutions, and central bank is responsible. We vested with the responsibility of regulating these deposit-taking institutions, and therefore they have come out with the Bank Supervision Department for LSBs and LCBs, and non-bank supervision department for RFCs, and the fifth category indicated dealers, PDs or primary dealers, are also supervised by the non-bank supervision department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Until about 5 or 6 years ago, PDs were regulated by the Public Debt Department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. But now it is regulated by the non-banking supervision department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So the PD is not a deposit-taking institution as such, but it is mainly responsible to distribute the treasury bills and treasury bonds, government securities, and market them among the general public and the business entities around the country. Then the fourth one, unit trusts. There are quite a few of them in Sri Lanka. Unit trusts are supervised by SCC mainly, and some aspects they have report to the central bank also, but mainly supervised by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, because the units sold by these so-called unit trusts, units sold by so-called unit trusts are subject to price variation. You see the main difference. Those entities supervised by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, there is no price intact for the deposits that they accept from the general public. Only they pay interest, and thereby the capital is 100% guaranteed. LCBs, LSBs, RFCs, the capital paid is 100% guaranteed. So they are deposit-taking institutions, and only variation that can be is the rate of interest that is paid. But the unit trust, when a member of the general public buy a unit trust from a unit trust company, the price of unit that was bought by the public can vary, can go up, can go down, depending on the level of ability and the success rate of the fund invested by the unit trust in various assets, perform better or they lose some money. How do they lose money? Unit trusts invest mainly on the government treasury bills and treasury bonds, more percentage, and also they have a greater percentage than the banks invested in stock exchange or Colombo Stock Exchange or any other assets that may the return may vary a great deal in the lifetime of the investment. So therefore, unit trust performance, the fund managed by the unit trust, although they are managed by professional fund managers, can vary, and they have specific units created for high growth, meaning that is they invest in more on the more risky assets like Colombo Stock Exchange or other assets which vary with the price in the market. But when they invest in treasury bonds, the return is 5-6% or whatever the yield they carry. At the same time, with the interest rate level changes in the country, the price of the treasury bond also could vary with the variation of the interest rates. Then we have the managed funds. There are a couple of managed funds in Sri Lanka performing, and also insurance companies. Insurance companies are supervised by the Insurance Board of Sri Lanka. That aspect has to improve a lot in Sri Lankan context. When you compare with the developed financial markets, insurance penetration is in the region of about 70% in those markets. But very sad that in Sri Lanka, insurance penetration is in the region of below 20%. People in Sri Lanka would look at insurance only when the law necessitates. Example, when you buy a motor vehicle, there is police ordinance or some other traffic ordinance that require the owner of the motor vehicle to to obtain a motor insurance. So therefore, that's a compulsion. But otherwise, life insurance and other asset insurance are very low. But is it the same case with the deposit-taking institutions, licensed commercial bank, licensed specialist bank? Is there any compulsion by the law that everybody should go and deposit in a bank, excess funds, that they should deposit in a bank or specialized bank or finance company? There's no law like that, but general public has come to a decision that their excess money should be deposited at a bank or a finance company, because their rate of servicing or rate of debt servicing or the ability to repay the deposited money have been satisfactory, except for a few cases like ETI and the Single Trust, that current present hot topics, mismanaged, and then most of the blame goes to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka for poor supervision. But however, generally, general public are eager to deposit their excess savings in those institutions rather than keeping their money at home, basically to earn interest, all right. And the servicing have been good or satisfactory. But can I say the same thing with insurance companies? Insurance, do you think unless there is a compulsion by law, most of us would go and buy a motor vehicle insurance? And as you see, when you buy a vehicle, most of the people opt to buy a third-party insurance. The insurance cover only for the third party in an accident. The first two parties are the insurance company and the vehicle owner, insurance policy buyer. Third party is the other party, third party who is involved in a motor accident. That is to get away from the law, only to comply with the compulsion of the law. The community who buy comprehensive insurance cover for the motor vehicle is very less in Sri Lanka. Can we just drill down and find out the reason why insurance penetration is low in Sri Lanka? Anybody good comment? The insurance industry in Sri Lanka, I think there are about 22 insurance companies approved by the Insurance Board of Sri Lanka. The insurance contract is based on trust. There is a Latin word, uberrima fidei. Uberrima fidei. The party who is buying insurance policy must declare honestly all the conditions attributable or affecting the insurance policy, insurance contract. And the insurance company also must try and live up to the expectation. Insurance trust, the insurance trust between the parties must be ensured. Uberrima fidei. Now, when an insurance proposal is put forward to an insurance company goes through everything and then stipulates before contracting the insurance to earn the premium, their marketing would come out with various attractions. But once the contract is established and the premium is paid, and when it comes to a point where motor vehicles accident claims, honoring the accident claims, or in the life insurance meeting the death insurance claim or medical insurance claims, the reputation of Sri Lankan insurance companies is that they would try to evade honoring the liability of claims as much as possible. Do you agree with me or not? I'm trying to take you to a point that the confidence and confidence between the parties in the market, because money brokers is also a party in the market and which serves a set of clients, licensed commercial bank, licensed specialized bank, and primary dealers, and maybe in some cases you do serve unit trusts as well. So because of this endeavor to evade responsibility or avoid honoring insurance claims, the general public does not trust the insurance companies that much. But in the case of developed markets, where the insurance penetration is above 70%, the insurance companies, when it comes to meeting a claim, they are very smooth. Those who have lived in a foreign country would agree with me that when life insurance or any property insurance claim is put forward, within a few days, or as soon as the insurance claim is forwarded, you see some action happening. The insurance companies show that they are processing the claim, and various constructive steps are taken, and maximum within a couple of days, the claims are met. And reducing the claim by the insurance company is sometimes not heard. They would love to show their commitment by meeting the claims that are put forward, and then make that an attractive marketing tool to gather more insurance buyers, more insurance policy buyers from the rest of the population. But here, our insurance company seems to think that when they reduce a claim, when they avoid honoring a claim, that others may not know that, or others may not hear that. But it's not so. In a community, marketing by word amongst the clients is more stronger. They would say, don't go to this insurance company, they won't pay your claims. Processing of claims are delayed, and so on and so forth. So, same thing applies to development of the money market and forex market, and then treasury bill market and treasury bond market. I would compare the credit card market, the debit card market by the banks with the insurance policy market by the insurance companies. It is true that both insurance policy buyers and the credit card holders sometimes might resort to unethical practices. Insurance policy buyers might forward bogus claims. Same way, credit card holders might try to purchase goods above the limit or do some underhand tricks, and then try avoid paying the credit card bill outstanding. The banks who have issued credit cards have a norm, about 2 to 3% of the turnover they allocate for such unscrupulous characters using credit cards. They take all the precautions with experience to avoid those people, but still they have a reserve fund to write them off, at least 2% of the total turnover out of billions of rupees. But the insurance industry, in meeting claims, they don't do such prudent practice. Because in population, you encounter various characters who would have fraudulent mind, but not on the look of it, but in their heart to heart, they might want to default. Similarly, when the LSBs, LCBs, and the RFCs grant loans, there are defaults. There are non-performing loans. So, although those financial entities, intermediaries, they try to identify such individuals to the maximum possible level in processing the loans or credit card applications. They provide certain amount of funds for those defaults. So this is very sad that the insurance industry is not progressing as expected in Sri Lanka particularly. So there is a good lesson for us to take especially money brokers and then banking institutions to trust each other more while taking all the precautions to avoid falling into pitfalls. But you must at least make an attractive marketing tool showing trust to each other. All right. So that's one aspect that I want to highlight, especially the bankers' point of view of business and brokers as partners or in this business with the bankers must ensure that to build the trust between the bankers and trust between the primary dealers and trust between the any other entity, unit trust or corporate clients that the money brokers might come across in their activity on a day-to-day basis. So financial intermediaries, the responsibilities. Safety of depositors' funds is the main responsibility, and that is the prime responsibility of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka as well. In Monetary Board that assigned or delegated the power to Central Bank of Sri Lanka Bank Supervision Department to regulate the licensed commercial banks, and had delegated the power to regulate the licensed specialized banks and registered finance companies to non-bank supervision department and also the primary dealers. And the main motto is the safety of the depositor. They are trying to protect the depositors' funds and best interest of the depositors. The depositors' funds must be protected, and any single cent that is due to a depositor must be paid and not deprived. That is the motto, responsibility of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and each and every banking institution and each and every finance company and each and every primary dealer. When it comes to unit trust and other funds and also companies who issue shares, Securities and Exchange Commission wants to ensure the safety of the investor. Safety of the investor. The difference is the depositor and the investor. Investors expect not only the interest income, not only dividend income, the capital gain. So SEC, Colombo Stock Exchange, and individual stock brokers are expected to maintain that confidence level with the investors that they would not be deprived of their money by way of interest, dividends, capital gains, that they would be protected. So, and also the optimum allocation of resources. Optimum allocation of resources. How do they ensure that? Optimal allocation of resources. Now, when in a country, you have a certain level of savings. What is the rate of savings in Sri Lanka compared to other developed countries? Level of savings in the sense, not the rate of interest of savings, level of funds. I'm sure that some of you have read through the statistical publications issued by the Central Bank and the other entities that are responsible. The level of savings on an annual basis in Sri Lanka is in the region of 18%. And what is the level of savings in Singapore, do you think, at this point in time? In Singapore, it's now considered a much more developed country. The level of savings in Singapore is considered to be about 35%. It's simply about double, but 35%. And most of the developed countries, like Singapore, enjoy a level of saving in excess of 30%. So one basic requirement or ingredient to be considered a developed country is also a level of savings by the population. Not only population, the corporate entities and the government as well. In other words, government savings, corporate entities, business entities savings, and general public savings. These are considered to be level of savings. When it is higher, there is more impetus for development. When there's more savings funds, the development, this success in the business activities is more. Because for the level of savings and in an economy, you don't have to pay interest to the outside world. But in Sri Lanka, that level of savings in the region of 18%. I must say, the biggest culprit is in Sri Lanka is the government. Government is not at all considered of savings. It is in a dissaving effort. That is because the people in the authority, they do not consider savings as a agenda item. They want to spend wherever possible. Luckily, the present government had contained unwanted expenses or avoided unwanted expenses such as luxury motor vehicles for the members of parliament and then cabinet of ministers, and therefore that amount of money is saved at the moment. So level of saving in Sri Lanka in the current period is considered to be at the rate of about 18%, whereas the level of savings in comparable developed country, Singapore, is in the region of 35%. And with the development, the level of saving rises because more business activities, more profits, more savings from the earned profits accrue to in the balance sheet of individuals, of corporate entities, and in the government. So that's the optimum level of allocation of resources in the first place. Secondly, optimal level of allocation of resources has to happen with the government allocating resources to the essential economic development activities. Whereas when we are required to develop the financial markets, we must look at developing the manpower, dedicated education, proper aimed education to develop the language skills, technical skills, and also knowledge of the economy activity and the finance markets knowledge has to be arranged for the human resource. And we have been discussing a lot about the debt exchanges and derivative exchanges. Such entities has to be developed. So money invested in those will only create the ability to make more savings when those efforts bear fruit or serve the nation, become serviceable to the markets. So likewise, there are other industries like agriculture, there's industry, and then various other industries. There should be proper way of allocating resources which enable more activities and generation of more profits and resulting in more savings to the economy. So that is what we mean by optimal level of resource allocation. When we think of a banking institution or financial institution, finance company, the pool of funds collected by way of deposits has also to be allocated resourcefully. That pool of funds has to be allocated to certain loan products, certain investments, and there is a lot of thinking and a lot of strategic decisions made in allocating such funds by way of strategic planning committees, asset and liability management committees, and there's a lot of plans put forward. But when it comes to Sri Lankan economy, where do we see such planning? Where do we see such committees? We don't see. So the resource allocation has to improve a lot to improve the government level of savings. And when you take off Sri Lanka, the economic perspective, Sri Lanka is basically a agricultural developing based economy. So where do we see the more resource allocated to Sri Lanka? Do we see more resource allocated to the agricultural provinces? Most resource allocation is on the Western province. The agricultural districts or provinces, allocation of funds or granting of loans by the banks or finance companies is very, very low. So the farming community does not have adequate financial resources to improve their farming activities. So basically, we end up importing most of the agricultural produce when we are able to produce them locally. So importation costs money. We have the exodus of foreign exchange or drain of foreign exchange happens from the economy to the other countries. I guess you got a fair idea of resource allocation as well. So activities of a bank, treasury. Basically, when it comes to a bank activities, as indicated just a while ago, there is a huge pool of funds, basically the depositors' money and the shareholders' funds on the liability side of the balance sheet. And the resource allocated mostly to the lending to customers. If you equate the total pool of funds in a bank to 100 rupees, shall we say deposits of 90 rupees and shareholders funds of 10 rupees, total 100 rupees, liability side. And on the asset side, there would be about 60 rupees loans granted to customers. Then you left over with 40 rupees. And you make investments in treasury bill, treasury bonds, and other investable assets required for banking business. Another about 25 rupees. That is 85 rupees. There will be another 15 rupees left. That 15 rupees mainly is managed by the treasury of a bank. The treasury of a bank, because investing treasury bills and bonds plus in the money market, call money market and so on and so forth, and other sometimes towards stock exchange also some funds are allocated. Basically, as we discussed yesterday, when there's a reserve requirement of 2% for 100 rupees, 2 rupees has to be with the central bank, and only 98 rupees will be with the bank to invest. And when 100 rupees, when interest has to be paid on 100 rupees, and when there's only 98 rupees to earn that interest plus the profit margin, naturally the required return of rate required return is much higher than the rate of interest paid on deposits. When the interest rate paid on deposits is 5%, while keeping two rupees at the central bank and administrative costs and then profit margin requirement, you have to earn at least 8 to 10 rupees profit to make profitable that year for that period. So likewise, lending excess funds at optimum rate to short-term money market is one of the key criteria, key functions, key activities of a treasury. So where money brokers services are required by the bank to best of information and maintaining confidentiality, and also then it comes to borrowing funds to cover deficits to meet statutory, regulatory and management requirements. There at times there can be deficits financed by the activities of the bank treasury. There cannot be always excesses. There are periods that deficits occur. So there again, money broker services will be required by the bank treasury to finance that deficit. That invest in money market deficits to meet statutory, regulatory and management requirements. So to all that, they should find the surplus units with the help of money brokers, and those deficits must be financed to meet the regulatory and management requirements, to maintain the necessary reserves. There's the cash management activities, including the cash letters and then investing in treasury bills, treasury bonds for sufficient returns, and taking advantage of the changes in the yield curve, interest rate curve, where the money brokers can support the bank treasuries in professionally developed tools. Then trading in money market, foreign exchange market, and the permitted derivatives markets. There again, money brokers are in the height of placement to support the bank's treasuries in finding the best bid and best offer, and potentially where there variations could happen, just by way of research report, they can discuss with the bank treasuries that this is the possible things to happen, and please you may look at these areas of investment or liquidating this investment and switching on to another investment. Such reports, such advice will be very welcome by the bank treasuries. Objectives of the bank treasury: obviously, minimize exposure to adverse interest rate movements. When there's adverse interest rate movements, they will want to shift the portfolios to the better ones, exit the loss-making ones, reducing ones, and entering the higher yielding ones. Minimize exposure to adverse exchange rate movements. Similar story. Minimize exposure to adverse exchange rate movements. Then minimize cost of funds and to maximize return of investments. Minimize cost of funds and maximize return on investments. Minimizing cost of funds is very well supported by the units connected to the treasury of a bank. They statistically find out what is the cost of funds. Cost of funds for a bank is interest rate paid on savings deposits and time deposits. current account deposits, of course, they zero interest paid. But however, there are administrative costs, and then a composite cost of funds has to be arrived at statistically for the entire banking organization, entire pool of funds. So to that end, Treasury is supported by marketing departments, operation departments, statistical department, and finance department, and various units. And then they meet, communicate with each other very frequently on statistical models. And then they see ways and means of reducing the cost of funds at every point in time. How can money brokers help that? When a banking institution is in need of funds, finding the best offer rate for a certain period of funds, they could very well support the banking institutions in minimizing the cost of funds. And also maximizing return of investments. Similarly, whatever the amount of funds managed by the Treasury for investments, the money brokers could support them by showing the best investment return. Best investment return, so that the maximizing return on investment could happen. Monitor, evaluate, and report on Treasury performance. This happens all the time. There are dedicated staff who handles that. Of course, supported by the computer simulation models, and optimize market risk-related Treasury activities. Market risks are analyzed starting from the middle office of a Treasury, and there are specialized risk management units in established banks. They do explore what are the market risks that the bank undergo, and then they do various models, and they come out with solutions to either share the risks using derivatives with others who would love to see those risks, or else they absorb the risk with the and evaluate the return that they get for the risk undertaken. Sorry, excuse me. As you all know, higher the risk, there should be higher return. There are some products in the banking and financial markets which do not carry high return, but there is a risk, there is a greater risk as well. So specialized risk management units business is to highlight those where high return is commensurate, high return is not generated comparative to the risk undertaken, and that the banks try to avoid such risks for such transactions, and then get into the higher yielding, higher return products and markets where the risk premium is covered by the return to a great extent. Then structuring and arranging short, medium, and long-term funding for the bank at the lowest cost, optimizing flexibility and spread of debt maturity. I think the word themselves are self-explanatory. We should not wait much time because we have to cover more. So these are the objectives of bank treasury, and you could imagine how to place your bank broking organization, broking house to serve such banking institutions, such primary dealers, to serve them better. Borrowing funds and transacting of risk management instruments with an environment of control and compliance within approved risk parameters to protect banks' financial assets and minimize costs. There again, it is very well explained. maintaining liquidity levels and managing cash flows to meet known and reasonable unforeseen funding requirements. That's a very important point. Unforeseen, unexpected funding requirements. Unexpectedly, you may have to sell your investment in treasury bill, treasury bonds to quickly garner funds to where unforeseen funding requirements comes in. So this will have to happen without delay and without wasting much time, meaning very quickly, so that the market rates doesn't vary much in those transactions when they are executed. Ensure all financial statutory requirements are maintained at optimum level, like reserve requirement and tier 1 capital requirement, tier 2 capital requirement. What is tier 1 capital requirement? Tier 1 capital requirement of a bank is the clean shareholders' funds. Shareholders contributed funds to the banking institution, plus the reserves maintained by the bank, profit reserves maintained by the bank, is the tier 1 funds. Then what is tier 2? Tier 1 funds, that is clean shareholder funds, plus the long-term debentures and then other debt instruments issued to absorb, mobilize capital. So like that, tier 1, tier 2 statutory requirements are there separately. Ensure implementation of internal controls, very important. Internal controls are very important. And then those internal controls, as broking firms, individuals, you also should be able to, you should be aware. And for you, directly important is that to see whether the banking institutions record their conversations, whether they practice segregation of front office, back office, middle office, segregations. Those are the internal controls. Without to avoid the leakage of funds by way of frauds, by way of loss-making transactions, hidden transactions, and so on and so forth. Then ensure that the board of directors, management, relevant staff are kept informed of latest development in treasury markets, products, methodologies, controls, compliance requirements, and accounting treatments. They also are very basic, and then the broking fraternity also could take a lesson out of that by way of research reports with the development, whatever the issues that are coming up in the market. You could produce research reports and share with the banking fraternity so that information is shared. Okay, we come to a very important point, Nostro-Vostro account management. Now tell me, what is the main difference between the Nostro and Vostro? What is a Nostro account and what is a Nostro account? These two are two Latin terms. Nostro is our account with you or my account with you. Vostro is your account with me. Your account with me. Nostro, Vostro. Basically, Nostro account is the accounts, foreign currency accounts, and even home currency accounts maintained at a different bank. At a different bank. For that particular bank, it is a Nostro account. It is a Nostro account. What is a Nostro account in rupees for most of the banks in Sri Lanka is the rupee account maintained at the central bank. What is the Nostro account for US dollar? Is the dollar account maintained in a bank in New York or any other country in US dollars. What is the Nostro account in euro? Is the euro account maintained in one of the European countries or any overseas country? So it's our account with you or my account with you, Nostro account. And vostro account is if any other bank maintaining account with my bank is a vostro account for me, vostro account for me. And for the other bank, it is a nostro account. For me, it's a vostro account in any currency for that matter. And basic requirement is that the exchange control regulation by the central banks itself is that the nostro accounts and vostro accounts should not be overdrawn, should be funded, should carry positive balance at all times. Basic logic is that nostro account, my account with you, if it carries overdrawn balance, I am liable to pay overdraft interest. And basically, I have overdrawn, I have borrowed from that overseas bank or the other bank that I maintain account. So exchange control regulations are that you cannot overdraw, and bank supervision regulation is that you cannot overdraw an account unauthorizedly. Unapproved overdrafts are not permitted when you maintain accounts with other banks. And then when a vostro account is overdrawn, that means the other bank who maintains the account with me that had overdrawn, I have granted a loan like overdraft like, so which is also not permitted. On the overdraft on vostro account, I might earn interest, but how about the loss of total capital overdrawn? If that other bank vanishes without paying the overdrawn amount, then I had to write off the amount overdrawn. So all the nostro and vostro accounts has to be funded timely to maintain positive balances. Excess funds are costly and eat into the bottom line. If you keep excessive funds, also loss of interest. Do you think that the central bank will pay interest on excess funds maintained other than the reserve requirement? No, they don't pay interest. And any US bank who maintains the US dollar account for our bank, nostro account, do they pay interest on excess money? No, they don't pay interest. So that amount of funds, the bank does not earn interest. Performance affected. Therefore, the performance of the bank is affected. So therefore, one of the prime job, one of the key function of a treasury of a bank or a finance company is that to proper cash management, proper management of nostro account, proper management of vostro accounts, to earn interest, to maximize earning of interest, and then reduction of interest cost, interest expenses on overall balances. Funding. Ascertaining the requirement amount of funds is a gigantic task. How do we do that? Ascertaining the requirement of funds. There should be numerical, statistical reporting by the entire business unit, entire list of business units to the treasury, and that flowing of information must be very quick. Now that the banks have adopted central computer systems, one computer hub, computer hardware, or a main server managing all the business units connected to that. Therefore, it's a very conveniently, whatever the business transaction happen at any unit, the cash flows can be updated very quickly. As soon as the transaction is booked or input to the computer system at any business unit, the cash flow updating happens mandatorily. Shall we take an example? If an import bill is negotiated and then transacted at the imports department of a bank, importing a motor vehicle from Japan, meaning a payment of Japanese yen to the supplier on behalf of our customer. So what is the transaction here? The customer who is importing the vehicle, rupees, shall we say 12 million rupees, pays the bank 12 million rupees. Shall we say cash deposited? For easier to understand. Cash deposited 12 million rupees by the customer at the imports department. So immediately cash, vault cash is increased, and that is reflected at the treasury. That so vault cash is gone up by 12 million rupees. Then the requirement to pay yen, shall we say 10 million yen? 10 million yen payment in the Nostro account in Tokyo. Nostro account in Tokyo, Japanese yen 10 million outflow. And that may happen in a week's time. 7 days time, your Nostro account is going to be debited in with 10 million yen in Tokyo. So automatically, as quickly as the import department key in the data to the computer, the Nostro account in Japanese yen will see a debit of 10 million yen with a possible date of 7 days time. So therefore, the cash flow statements in yen and rupee are updated simultaneously. Likewise, export also happens like that. Export, receipt of euros to the Euro Nostro account, 1 million. Shall we say Brandix artists exporting garments, and then Brandix 1 million euros, 140 million rupee outflow to the Brandix current account maintained at a certain branch. So there's a possibility that they would withdraw, but so far they're not withdrawn. So therefore, Euro account will show a credit of, or expected credit of 1 million euros in, shall we say, 1 month's time with a possible date. This is a very delicate operation because the export department must indicate the possibility of value date. The importer in the European country from the Brandix group will only will transfer money to the Nostro account of Euro of our bank within 1 month, maybe towards 3rd or 4th week. So we have to show them a possibility of receipt of 1 million euros, right? So that will be a possible debit of, in our books, in our computer, debit of 1 million euros, expecting a credit from, or remittance from the import of garments in the European country. So likewise, a delicate matching of debits and credits has to happen in our books of accounts and the cash flow statements. So I just took two main famous examples, but there are more complicated examples, more complicated transactions. But for each of these transactions, the computer should carry the expected debits, expected credits, and then the projected balances as well, for the treasury dealers to take immediate decisions in funding the deficit accounts, short accounts which are to be paid out, and then investing funds which are received to the Nostro accounts for better interest yield, leaving only a marginal positive balance. So the cooperation, the information flow has to be meticulously planned, and the knowledge and the skill, sharp eyes of the treasury dealer who manage the cash flow is extremely important to avoid any loss of interest or expenses of interest. Then transferring excess funds or selling of for LKR. It happens almost all the time between various foreign currencies, and then also finally converting them to rupees, so that basically things happen with the knowledge of and the skill of the treasury dealers. The funds are normally transferred to the US dollar or one of the main foreign currencies and reported to the central bank as well. Finally, also it happens that you shift your funds to the appreciating currency. If the US dollar is appreciating, you shift your other foreign currencies to US dollar funds. Or if the US dollar is depreciating and the yen is appreciating, you may sometimes shift your money to the yen currency and then keep it until the curve shows a dent or a downward decline. They do currency conversion also, take advantage of currency fluctuations on exchange rate wise. So, what are these SWIFT 202, SWIFT 5400, and so on and so forth? In transacting these messages, transacting in these various products, imports, exports, and then foreign remittances, and then also dealing with the Central Bank of Sri Lanka rupee account, all these message types are extremely important, extremely important. As money brokers, you also should have a knowledge of these message types used by the banks. SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. The SWIFT is an organization based in Belgium, started in 1960s with about 15 banks originally. Now SWIFT is used by about 12 of 14,000 banks around the globe, and all of them have become members of SWIFT. All the Sri Lankan banks that we see in Colombo are members of SWIFT. They are using SWIFT membership. They become members, and this why I highlight the word member here is that SWIFT organization is like a cooperative society. SWIFT manages the membership. Anybody to become member has to pay a large sum of membership fee, and then also each annual membership. SWIFT is a cash-rich organization. It does not have even a single euro or single cent loan or overdraft from any bank in the world. In fact, when the membership is collected, and then for each bank, when they originate a message, they pay a message fee because the amount of characters in the length of the message. Message fees, a charge for the message is also levied by the SWIFT. And out of those income, they make cash flows. The income is membership fee and the message income, message fee income. And when in 1 year they total up the income and meet all the expenses and use the balance money, excess of income or expenses, to finance the members' messages, members' requirements for the next year by way of a rebate or rebate on message transmitted. That means if a message is charged 100 rupees per message this year, next year that message charge might be about 80 rupees because that balance 20 rupees is a rebate of profit made by that cooperative society last year. So likewise, and the other important feature is that the SWIFT manages its own messaging software and hardware, both. SWIFT does not allow any member to buy or to procure software or hardware from any third party, outside party. If you are a member of Swift, you have to buy your hardware and software from Swift. That is to avoid hacking and then replicating or whatever by unscrupulous elements, because the Swift messages contain high value transactions between banks. Therefore, Swift messages are encrypted end-to-end, lines are encrypted end-to-end, and hardware is also encrypted, and virus guards are installed, and maximum protection is ensured by the Swift, and Swift expect all the member banks also to ensure encryption, firewalls, and moreover, they expect the member banks to ensure password control to the maximum possible, safeguarding where there are Swift connectivity to a terminal. They expect the room to be locked, and then entrance to the room by unauthorized persons are also prohibited. Should be prohibited by, and then there should be password allowed authority to enter such rooms, and then also to use such terminals where Swift connectivity is available. Again, password control must be implemented, and plus there should be menu controls. Now, for example, if in the imports department, only the import side of import on the Swift messages used for import business only should be shown in the menu of each and every user. On the export department, on the menus of programs, only the export side of messages only should be shown on the menu. And moreover, banks have gone further by way of when you import a transaction of exports, automatically the relevant Swift messages are populated by the computer, not by the operator. And when at the import department, when an import transaction is input, automatically the import transaction Swift messages are automatically populated, prepared by the computer, not by the operator. That human involvement aspect is eliminated to that extent to avoid fraudulent activities. So therefore, using Swift is a way of enhancing security to the messaging areas or message communication aspects. So since this is a large subject, and we are almost come to the time, that is 6 o'clock. I will cover this extensively on the next Tuesday, and then see what questions also can come up on this area at the exam. Any questions by anyone? Do you have any questions, please? No?
Not from me, sir.
Thank you. So we had only 11 participants out of 17. possibility of one or two participants using same terminal. Is that right? So read a lot and then prepare for the exam. As I said, the tutorials has to be perused very much. At the same time, day-to-day market practices also to be brushed up, and a little bit of general knowledge. General knowledge means not general knowledge per se, but your profession only. Yeah. Okay. So then, thank you very much for your cooperation. We'll meet up on the Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Good night. Good night.